All right, hard to believe college football week 6 is upon us here. A lot of top 25 teams in action, conference play, a lot to go over here on this edition of the College Football Kickoff Show, powered by WagerTalk.com. Of course, the Thursday crew in the house here today. We're going to cover at least one of these games coming up over the next 24 hours. You got a couple of games tonight, couple of games on Friday night. That should be very interesting. And then, of course, a lot of big matchups happening on Saturday. Drop any games, any questions you may have, those of you joining us live here today in the chat, and we'll get to as many as we can here as we move along and welcome in the one and only, the Pen, Ralph Michaels in the house. Drew, Martin, Betts ready to roll here, as is Rob Veno, ready to rock here. And let's start with tomorrow night's big game here, Ralph, as Syracuse finds themselves as a dog in this one, taking on UNLV. Now, everyone thought that UNLV would take a step back because Luka demanded more money and didn't get it, and then he left. And, well, that didn't seem to matter much last week, Ralph, with UNLV, but can they keep it rolling against the Qs here tomorrow night? 6.5 is what we're seeing.
You know what, Joe? Can I defer this one to Rob Veno? Rob Veno put his initials on this game. I'll be talking about Air Force and Navy in just a minute.
So, you know what, Rob? All yours then, Veno. You give me that. You guys went out of order on the sheet I see here. So go ahead. Veno, talk to me about UNLV. Are you a believer that new quarterback, same situation, they should have no problem with a very one-dimensional Syracuse team?
Yeah, Joe, the powers that be assigned me to Syracuse and UNLV, so I will take it. They opened 357.5, money pouring in on UNLV, right? 6.5 now, 58.5. It's an interesting contrast in offensive strengths. The Syracuse team is the number 3 team in the nation in passing, behind Kyle McCord, ex-Ohio State QB. They're averaging 372.5 yards through the air, Syracuse is. And UNLV, of course, you talked about the quarterback situation there. Last week, we got our first dose of Malik Williams. And UNLV, with the quarterback run incorporated into their ground game, owns the 6th best rushing offense in the country. They put up 283 a game on the ground, almost 6 per carry, averaging 5.8 to be exact. So their play calling, Barry Odom's squad, has been enormously run heavy. The play calling ratio for this team, how about 74.6% run? It's academy-like, and only 25.4% pass. They've had 264 total plays, 197 of those are runs. Again, it's the backfield, it's the quarterback. Everybody's involved here. Syracuse, although they throw for a bunch and they don't run it real well, their play calling really isn't as lopsided. It's about 60.5 to 39.5. Their total yardage, though, is extremely lopsided. Syracuse doesn't gain much on the ground. So you got a battle of an offense that wants to move it through the air, another offense that wants to move it through the ground. Question becomes, which team defensively is better equipped to stop the other? And it's interesting here because UNLV has some pretty solid pass defense numbers, only allow 56.7% completions. The quarterback rating that they have is 17th best in the country. They've got 9 picks, albeit mostly in a couple of games, and they have 13 sacks. So, you know, while the coverage may give up some yardage, they definitely don't give up a lot of completions. They get to the quarterback and they pick the ball off. That's going to be a little difficult for Syracuse. We'll see if their offensive line can stand up. The bad news for UNLV, they haven't played anybody who can throw the ball. Kansas is 112. Houston is 121. Utah Tech from the FCS. Last week they faced Fresno. Fresno's got the 29th best pass offense in the country, and they destroyed Fresno 59-14. So I don't know if you can count the numbers or not in that game. It's a come-from-behind effort by Fresno. Syracuse's run defense, that's the question mark here, Joe, because they've been hit pretty good. Ohio U ran it on them, 262. Stanford ran it on them, 173. And Georgia Tech got 4.7 per carry, and they were coming from behind, throwing the football. So I venture to say that the Syracuse run defense is going to have more trouble than the UNLV pass defense will. All three of those teams that Syracuse gave up big yardage to on the ground and a lot of yards per carry all had mobile quarterbacks just like the UNLV team does. So they're having trouble stopping dual threat QBs here. Only time they stopped anybody was against Holy Cross last week. I think when you look at it in the end, Syracuse's pass protection is under the gun. They've given up 11 sacks. The other team has 13. It's the first road game for Syracuse. You're going to get them out of the Carrier Dome where they get that huge energy boost, and now you're going to put them in Allegiant Stadium, and Allegiant Stadium is probably going to be rocking. It's not a true national spotlight game because Oregon and Michigan State will be playing at the same time on Friday night, but I'm sure Barry Odom's team will be fired up. And I looked at this from two angles because each team is more than capable of scoring points here. Even though the line has moved, Joe, I think laying 6.5 is the right way to go. And if you'd rather play total, I think you probably get over here. But I think my first preference would be UNLV minus the points.
I'm with you there, Veno, because I just don't see – I see them very one-dimensional, Syracuse as well. I think UNLV's defense is a little bit underrated right now in the market, and I'm with you here. I think they could keep this thing rolling here tomorrow night. A big shout-out to those of you guys, by the way, joining us in the chat rooms live here. Give us a thumbs up if you could. Follow on TikTok. I see Ian has got a question about R.J. Harvey, the stud running back at UCF, who is just running over teams literally. What a shock, except, he couldn't run over Colorado last week, but that's a different story. Might have some success against Florida. I will tell you that, Ian. We'll talk a little bit more about that game coming up. But we welcome back in the one and only Ralph Michaels because, nobody likes to talk about a game where the first team to 3 wins. But Ralph, the Pen, you are picking Air Force taking on Navy. Historically, not a lot of scoring, right, Ralph? We should just blindly bet the under in these service academies, or is this a different Navy team this year?
The answer to your first question is yes. The answer to your second question is yes.
Ooh.
So let's quantify that, Joe. If you blindly bet every under in a service academy game, that of course means Army, Navy, and Air Force, you have had 10 overs, 43 unders, and 1 push. That is 18.9%, or basically 81% to the under in all service academy games. Now, what you have to remember is this. This is a different day and age. When they changed the chop blocking rules a few years ago, we saw the service academies, talk about how they had to pass the ball more. So let's look at what they've done this season. Blake Horvath has thrown the ball 44 times in 4 games. I mean, think about that. You look back at Navy back in the 90s and early 2000s, they might have 44 passes in a year. Blake Horvath, 44 passes. What has he done? 68% completions with a 7-1 ratio. For Air Force, John Busha has thrown the ball 52 times. The problem? 36.5% completions with an 0-2 ratio. 2 different quarterbacks leading the teams. With Navy, we have a team averaging 466 yards per game. We have a team that is averaging 46 points and 20 first downs. In Air Force, 243 yards per game and 12 points per game, and that includes 21 points versus FCS Merrimack against FBS foes, 7 points at home against San Jose, 3 points at Baylor, 19 points at Wyoming. I do lean under, but again, this is a different scenario, so you have to put an asterisk on that stat. And I will say this, Joe, I do lean Navy first half, even though they have to lay those kind of points. When you look at the numbers, if this wasn't an Air Force Navy game, I would be all over Navy. They both have played very weak schedules, number 115 and number 132 lowest. But look at the yards per play diff. Navy is number 17 in the country at plus 2.06 yards per play. Air Force, number 126, minus 1.72. I don't know after 4 weeks if you're ever going to see another yards per play diff of almost 4 yards per play from one team to the next. The rivalry keeps me off backing Navy. I will lean with the under, but I will make a small suggestion here for the show. Navy first half.
Navy first half there, 36.5. I know Gooseballs in the house thinking that the number is starting to creep up here a little bit on that. But G. Hurt still wants to lay the points there with Navy. It feels like a different kind of Navy year. I just don't understand how the service academies drop off like Air Force, Ralph. Isn't that the whole point? You don't... The portal doesn't become into play when you're at Air Force, right? You don't have to worry about losing guys all the time, right? Isn't it just self-perpetuating every year with the service academies? Why such a terrible year so far for Air Force, you think?
That's 4 fingers, Joe. 1 returning starter for each finger I have up.
That's it.
That's it. I mean, that's the simple answer. They a Naval Academy, they play so few freshmen because you have to go through the plebe program and you have to get caught up to what you're doing. So, your starters become part-time starters as juniors, full-time starters as seniors. So those teams traditionally only return, they're always at the bottom of returning starters. But this was as bad as ever because of the offensive line being bereft of any talented returning starters coming back.
Shout out to Instagram, Authentic Trading Cards. Loves the points and loves the over 36 in there. So a little contrarian play from Instagram, but we do want to remind most people on Instagram this time of day have been day drinking anyway. So it's a pleasure to see you there as we welcome in the one and only Drew Martin to the house. And Drew, finally, we get to talk some big boy football here. Thank goodness you're here today as the SEC will be front and center when Georgia gets to beat the living snot out of Auburn. Did I say that out loud, Drew? I'm so sorry. I meant Georgia's taking on Auburn. And what the hell is going on with Hugh Freeze, Drew? Any clue as to what is happening at Auburn with this team? My goodness. It feels like a bounce back spot for Georgia, but something tells me you may not be looking that way.
Well, Joe, I mean, anytime you start losing football games in the SEC, you're going to be put on the hot seat a little bit. So especially at Auburn here, if they can fire Gus Malzahn after taking a team to the national championship and then just go to a 6-6 bowl game, they're going to fire anyone. So I'm not saying I agree with it, but that is life as an SEC head coach. You bring up day drinking. Talk about some day drinking. How about Athens, Georgia for the Battle of Brothers here, Deep South's oldest rivalry? I know from personal experience, those guys like to get after it. And we're seeing Georgia here, Joe, 23, 24-point home favorites, 52 being the total. And first off, we got to talk about the Auburn side of things. Auburn turnover Tigers, 15 turnovers through 5 games, 9 interceptions. If they stop throwing it to the other team, they actually might be pretty good here, Joe. If you look at the yards per play margin, they actually average more yards per play than Georgia, 2.8 plus to Georgia, just +2. And Georgia playing Alabama last week, obviously, a tough one going down there. But even more importantly here, Joe, something I like to look at in college football is last 3 weeks, how each team is being priced. Auburn has not lost by more than 10 points this season. Georgia, look at their last 3 games. They have dropped all 3 against the spread by 40 points ATS, meaning they've been overpriced by 40 points. To this point in the season, that's a situation I can't bet on a team. Now, look, is Georgia the better overall team? Yes. But are they 24 points better to a team that, hey, if they stop turning the ball over, really wouldn't be that bad? Hey, this is coming from an Auburn alumni, but overall, Joe, I actually think the dog here plus the points is worth a look. This is a surprising one. Keep in mind, it's not a tough trip. Athens and Auburn are 2 of the closest schools in the SEC. They play each other every year. There is going to be a lot of Auburn faithful there. I think the dog is barking a little bit, at least to stay within the number, Joe. So I would look towards Auburn plus a bunch of points here.
Yeah, it's interesting, too, coming out of that game. It's kind of uncharted territory for Georgia, right? Because that game against Alabama every year is usually, it's pretty taxing on them. I think 12-2 straight up, 8-6 against the spread after facing Alabama since 1990, 6-0 straight up at home. But covering that kind of number after such a grueling game and a big comeback seems, I'm with you, Drew, a bit excessive, doesn't it? I mean, if Alabama doesn't take a little something out of Georgia, not to mention, when the hell was the last time Georgia in a regular season had to bounce back after anything in a regular season? So I'm with you, man. It feels like a ton of points, no?
Yeah, it really does, Joe. And actually, I got a good stat here from the Gold Sheet. This week, guys, the Gold Sheet, they were actually throwing out a bunch of gems. Not sure if you got a chance to read it, Joe, but it's only $5 today, guys, on WagerTalk.com. Here's the trend. Since 2016, top 10 teams that lost as a favorite have gone 69-88. That's just 43% against the spread the following week. That's since 2016. In college football, FBS level. So that is a trend also pointing towards the big dog here in the Auburn Tigers.
Yeah, love our friends at the Gold Sheet. Love those trends they come up with. Certainly worth heading over to WagerTalk.com and taking advantage for $5, guys. It'll give you all the data, all the trends that you need to know when making these decisions when it comes to handicapping 40, 50 college football games. So there you got it. We've got 3 games in the book. We're going to go roundtable on 2 of the bigger games that we're going to break down, including Mizzou taking on Texas A&M. We're also going to talk about bounce back. How about Ole Miss throwing up all over themselves at home against Kentucky last week? They get to take on South Carolina, which appears to be a very popular dog so far is what we're seeing this week. But I do want to send a shout out to those guys, including Jesse Schul is in the chat room. Quite a stalker, Jesse Schul, in the chat room here. The other Jesse Schul will be on the show tomorrow, along with Teddy Covers, our Friday crew there. But it's always a pleasure to see him groveling in the chat room right now, trying to figure out whether or not Colorado's any good. Oh, there he is, Jesse Schul in the house. Very good, Jesse. We appreciate you stopping by here. And also any questions, and I see we got a couple of them coming in. Hoosier State Sports has a question about Indiana we're going to get to. That is coming up. And as well as you guys in TikTok and, of course, Facebook, hang out. We'll get to all of these questions after these games. And if you're watching on the replay, drop them in the comments, guys. These guys follow the comment section right up until kickoff on Saturday. So if you have a game, a question, drop them in the comments section as we get ready to take a look here at number 6, Mizzou taking on Texas A&M here. It's been some rough sledding here a little bit for A&M so far, but Mizzou coming off a bye. Ralph, I'll start it with you. It feels like a very dangerous Missouri team this year, but this is a big spot for them. Do you trust them here?
Well, Joe, you know what? How about if I say I have no idea? Yes, Missouri is impressive, and yes, they are number 8 at plus 253 yards per game. Yes, they are number 19 in the country at plus 2.0 yards per play diff. Their offense, number 19, their defense is 3. Those are all great numbers. The negative number is there are, 134 FBS teams? And this team has played the number 128 schedule. So when you play bottom feeders, it's very tough to judge how you will now do against a very good defense. Let's also remember, this is Missouri's first road game. Brady Cook, a fine season, 68.4% with a 4-1 ratio. But, they were sacked 3 times against Vanderbilt. That's pretty scary when you're at home against Vandy and you get sacked 3 times. When you look at Texas A&M, they have 7 sacks in the last 3 games. Now, when I look at A&M, am I comfortable with A&M? Well, I just want to give a shout out to Mike Elko. So all you people down there in College Station, Mike Elko, I will definitely release the status on Wegman tonight. This is what he said yesterday morning. So what does he do? He gives us a game time decision on the status. Thank you very much, Mike Elko. That is great. We really appreciate that quality information. But again, you look at his defense, allowing 331 yards per game. Yes, they played Notre Dame, held them to 356. But again, we've seen Notre Dame's offense. That wasn't very good. So to me, I say this. I lean Missouri. I lean the under. But there's no way I want to back Missouri going to College Station for your first road game of the season after having played no top 60 teams in the country. So color me under for this opinion on this game.
Yeah, I believe, and Rob, I believe last year Missouri was 4-0 against the number on the road. And I believe they also won as a home dog at Kentucky, or as a dog at Kentucky. I think they came close to beating Georgia in that crazy game. So there's some experience on this team, but it is, to Ralph's point, this is the first time going on a road. So is it going to be a rude awakening, or do you think it's business as usual for Missouri?
Well, a couple things here. If you're going to play A&M, you got to match up in the trenches, which I could probably definitively say Missouri does. Their offensive line has 3 potential NFL guys on it. Their defensive line is stout. So I think they match up there with A&M. I'd love to throw these comparison games out there, Joe, and I have to believe that as far as offense is concerned, Missouri's already seen this, especially if Marcel Reed goes at quarterback. Now, probably the mind game's being played by Mike Elko. Go ahead and prep for my drop back pocket passer. Go ahead and prep for my dual threat, run mobility style quarterback. Let's see if you can do both. But if you guess that Marcel Reed is going to play this game, then Missouri, like I say, has already seen that in Boston College. Marcel Reed equals Thomas Castellanos. A&M's run-heavy offense equals Boston College's run-heavy offense. A&M runs the ball 63+% of the time. And Boston College's need to have a lead in a game to be able to execute their game plan is the same as A&M. A&M coming from behind with Reed throwing the ball isn't going to work as well as it is if they're out in front. So Missouri has seen this already. They had a bye week last week. And A&M, for what it's worth, does come in off a very difficult game against Arkansas. That was a struggle to come from behind in that one. So I think where Missouri's concerned, you made a great point. They're not really intimidated by any venue or any team anymore. I think they totally shed that when they beat Ohio State in the Cotton Bowl, injured or not. I think Missouri's ready for this. You're taking less than a field goal, so you're kind of asking them to win straight up. But I would also say that A&M's probably better tested, for sure, as far as schedule is concerned. But the offenses that they faced, really, are they really Missouri's? Notre Dame is not a good offense. Bowling Green, with ex-Missouri quarterback Connor Bazelak, is not really a great offense from the MAC, at least when stacked up against A&M's defense. And then Arkansas seems to be a little hit or miss with Taylor Green, explosive in ways. But I think Missouri, with the ground game, with Luther Bird, that 3-headed monster at receiver, Theo Weiss Jr., Bird, and Mookie Cooper, I think they got a little bit too much here. I like Missouri in this game. It's not a strong play, but I think they can go down there to College Station and win.
I'm with you there, Rob. And Drew, Chris Porter in the chat room likes Mizzou all the way, and I agree with him. He likes the under in this one, low total. A&M has held 4 straight opponents to 20 points or less, and Mizzou only gives up 219 yards a game. That's the 3rd fewest, and 12 points a game. That's the 8th fewest in the country. These are 2 very good defensive teams. How much offense do you think we're going to get in this one?
They really have been, Joe. I think that's a huge question mark. Plus, you add on the fact it's 12 noon Eastern kick here. That's 11 a.m. local time. A lot of times college kids at that time, I definitely I don't like betting first half overs in that situation. So that might point towards, points being at a premium as well. I mean, sidewise, both Ralph and Rob talked about it, Joe, in terms of strength of schedule. I have it 143-27 in terms of Texas A&M playing the much tougher schedule. So anytime I get that kind of discrepancy, I always just think it's difficult. Not that Missouri can't come out and surprise. They absolutely can. Plus, they're off of the bye week. It's just a tough time to play. You know, their first road game of the season, home of the 12th man. A lot of question marks come in. But actually, I think you bring up a good point in terms of the under. We're getting it near 50 now. Both defenses. I do worry about, you know, Missouri coming out and being able to score. I thought Veno made a great point in terms of the A&M defense. Yes, their defensive ranks are good, but have they seen an offense like Missouri, or at least the capabilities that Missouri has? Probably not. Not that they, you know, can't still be a stout defense, particularly at home and early. A lot going on here, Joe. I lean towards the under. I had A&M circled as just this spot because of the strength of schedule, but after digging a little bit deeper into this game, I'm going to lay off of it sidewise. I think this is a difficult one. A fun one to watch and learn going forward with both of these teams, but sidewise, I'm probably going to stay off.
Yeah, and Wigman, I just totally just overvalued on so many levels with people. I just don't think he's a great college quarterback. I really don't. And the fact that he's not even, or he's playing coy, it's like it's like the same crap with Cam Rising. Like, I've given up any hope of Cam Rising playing another college football game, people. It's not going to happen. Let's be realistic here. It's unbelievable. These guys would have played already if they could have played. That's another big SEC battle. Yes, Ralph, you a big Wegman fan?
No, but I didn't back up Drew. So I just wanted to share this. I went to the database as Drew was talking. Hey, Drew, when there's a conference game that starts before noon local time, like they are in the Big 12 for those 11 o'clock games, going back to 2015, 47 overs and 69 unders, so 59.5% to the under. Those are conference games that start before noon Eastern local time.
Was that full game or first
like
half?
That.
Was that full game or first? That's full game.
I can do average scores for the first half, Joe, but the database does not have first half lines to give you the first half. So that is full game total, 47 over, 69 unders since 2015.
Makes total sense. Makes total sense in that spot there. 11 a.m. Eastern kick there for A&M and Mizzou. That is the one of the big SEC matchups coming up. The other one is going to be Ole Miss taking on South Carolina, and what a just throw-up job on so many levels by Lane Kiffin there and Ole Miss last week. They got caught at home with Kentucky, who, let's face it, that's a top 5, top 10 defense in the country. I think we can all agree on that. However, when you're supposed to be one of the best offenses, most prolific offenses in the country, and you're at home, you're supposed to be able to beat that, and they couldn't. The question that I have, and I'll send it back to you here, Rob Veno, is how much do we trust South Carolina at home to hold serve here? Ole Miss bounce back. Lane Kiffin has had some success in the past in this spot. They're still a very good offense. Can South Carolina keep up, you think?
Yeah, I think your only question should have been, Joe, is it time for Rob to give us an over?
Yes.
And I'll give it to you here.
Boom.
Ole Miss, you know, Kentucky is an outstanding defense, nation elite type of defense. And although Mississippi lost that game last week, Joe, Ole Miss put up 353 total yards. Doesn't sound like a lot, right? 353 for a team that's averaging over 600. That's 91 more yards than anybody else has gained against Kentucky this year. That includes Georgia. Georgia only gained 262 against Kentucky. This same South Carolina team only gained 252 against Kentucky. So Ole Miss put up yardage, the most yardage given up by an elite defense all season long. Didn't correlate to points. They wound up losing that game. South Carolina is a different story. We've talked an awful lot here about strength of schedule. Let's lean on that for this game. South Carolina, you know, the defensive numbers may look okay, but when you're playing Akron, Old Dominion, and Kentucky, those three teams right there, guys, rank 113th or worse in total offense in the nation. That's 3 of their 4 games. The only team that they played that can move the football whatsoever was LSU. LSU gave their defense a 1.5 quarter head start. They didn't score until 8:03 left in the second quarter. From that point on, they scored 36 points on this defense in 2.5 quarters. They scored on 5 of the next 6 drives. And on those 6 drives, they put up 356 yards, about 60 yards per possession. They absolutely destroyed this defense. Ole Miss can probably do the same to South Carolina. All that said, so I worry about Mississippi's defense right now. Mississippi looked really good defensively against their, let's call it a weak-ass schedule. Last week, they played Kentucky, who I just told you is 113th in the nation in total offense. How about Kentucky puts up 22 first downs against Ole Miss? They throw for 243 against Ole Miss. That's a red flag, especially against a team that's coming into a home game off of a bye, 2 weeks to prepare. They got their number 1 quarterback back, Lenore Sellers, and they scored 33 on LSU. Now, I'm not going to compare Mississippi's defense to LSU, but I'm not going to say they're separated by that much either. Ole Miss has a history of not being a great defensive team unless you're of the Hugh Freeze era where we kind of know why they had a good defense. So to me, when I see 53.5 posted in an Ole Miss game, and I know that South Carolina's played LSU here and gotten to 69, it just seems too low. That number seems so soft. I can't see any reason why these teams don't get to 55 minimum. I think this game gets up and over.
Yeah, and it's I believe, same opponents there, Drew. If you look, I guess Kentucky was thoroughly beaten by South Carolina earlier this year. So it's an interesting spot. Lane Kiffin has, like we said, 10-3-1 against the number as a road favorite since 2019. Do you trust Lane and Ole Miss to go on the road here and bounce back in a big way? Or is this thing a lot closer than the double digits they're going to need to win by to cover this thing?
I think it is a little bit closer. I do, Joe. I'm not too confident in the side part of it. And, you bring up like scoreboard comparisons here. Of course, the Kentucky game comes into it, and South Carolina, kind of dominated Kentucky. And then Ole Miss going and losing to Kentucky is 17-point favorites. But A plus B doesn't always equal C in the box score with college football. If you haven't learned that yet, you probably will soon betting this sport. There is a couple things that I worry about with South Carolina scoring points. Is their offensive line 3rd worst in the country in terms of letting up sacks. Now, a lot of those happened in the Kentucky game, so maybe they can kind of compiled there. But Ole Miss also has 53 tackles for loss, which is number 1 in the country. So that dynamic is almost something to watch early in the game, because usually that isn't something you can fix as the game goes on. If their defensive line is just pounding your quarterback, sometimes that's just the Jimmies and the Joes being better on the defensive front. I actually agree with Veno here, Joe. I think we're going to get more than, 54 points in this game. I think both offenses start to get after it. Now, South Carolina did get a good blueprint from Kentucky on how to stop Ole Miss. It's just, are they going to be able to? Because, when they faced pretty good offenses in the past, like Rob talked about, letting up some points against LSU. I think they might let up even more points against Ole Miss, and I think South Carolina is going to be able to score as well. They've actually been a surprising team here out the gate, one of the more surprising teams in the SEC. So I wouldn't be surprised if both teams get in the 30s, Joe. I like it up and over as well.
Another vote for the over here, Ralph, and I certainly think we can count on Ole Miss to have some success here offensively. I mean, South Carolina's defense is not Kentucky by any stretch of the imagination. But, Sellers has been hurt. I think the running back is hurt for South Carolina. There's some questions about that. Drew just mentioned how terrible that offensive line is. So is there concern on your part that South Carolina can score enough in order to keep this thing close?
Yeah, there is a concern. I mean, Beamer did say that Sellers has practiced well, and he looks good, and he's expected to go. He did not give an update on the running back. But I'm going to bring up some TNA, Joe, when I went to the database. And let me give you the system first, and I'll tell you why there should be an asterisk on it. So Ole Miss was a ranked team with at least 3 wins that is off their first loss as a dog or a sizable favorite. And their opponent is off a win, and they're a favorite of 5.5 or more. Now, why is that important? Well, you're a ranked team. You got your first loss. Is it a bubble burst? Those teams like Mississippi have gone 35-70, 33% against the spread. Now, the asterisk comes in for this reason. Previous to this year, if you're in the SEC and you lose a game, you're basically out unless you're Georgia or Alabama are going to play in the NCAA championship. But with the new playoffs, we don't have that same one-loss bubble burst mentality because Mississippi knows if they can run the table, they still are going to make the playoffs. There's no question. Now, granted, they host Georgia, they have to go to LSU. They've got a tough schedule, but at least the mindset is there where you're not eliminated where you used to be in the past. So we'll see how that trend continues to play out versus the old playoff system to the new. But how about this one, guys? A conference home dog of 4.5 or more off a home win with a bye versus a team not off a bye. So South Carolina is rested off a bye. They're a home dog of 4.5 or more, and they have a home win. Those teams have gone 40-10, 80% against the spread. That's an important thing, getting a win going into your bye, and now you are rested and ready to take the foe on. My biggest concern, you guys talked about the O-lines and the sacks, and there's no question. Mississippi is number 2 in 18 sacks per game. South Carolina is number 126 in sacks allowed, allowing 16 sacks. So I think South Carolina will struggle. I'm not okay to get to Mississippi with it. I lean with both Drew and Rob, but I'm going to throw this into the mix. Ole Miss has LSU on deck. If they pull away early, I think they sort of just run the ball and try to kill the clock because they're playing a second straight road game at LSU next week. I actually lean like LSU team total over first half. I think they can jump out quickly. I think they can expose South Carolina's offense early. So to me, my best bet here will be Ole Miss team total over for the South Carolina game.
Oh, not a bad way to look at it. Up and over the team total for Ole Miss. Interesting way to be able to look at that one. We do have some questions in the chat. And again, if you're joining us here live, if you have a game or a question here on any one of the games we've covered, drop them in the chat. If you're watching on the replay, drop them in the comments section. Of course, we'll be keeping an eye on the comments right up until kickoff. So anything you want to know or have a question about, we'll go ahead and address it. I did want to get to one of the questions here, and I'll come to you there, Ralph, about this one, as Hoosier State Sports wants to talk about Indiana football. Shocker. Absolute shocker with a handle like that he'd want to talk about the Hoosiers. Do they have a chance at making the playoffs in the Big Ten here? Do they have a chance of beating Michigan? How high are you on Indiana, Ralph? Because, boy, what a difference a coach makes, I guess, huh?
I'll tell you what, Kurt Ciganetti showed that I guess it's not just where you coach, it's how you coach. So congrats. I mean,
Man.
you look at what that coach did previously and what he did coming here. And, Curtis Warwick, 73%, 10.8 YPA, 11-2 touchdown ratio. That sort of explains why the Ohio Bobcats were so good. But, Rourke never put up those kind of numbers. So it's just the coaching. Listen, they're a great story. But again, you've played FIU, Western Illinois, Charlotte. And yes, you beat Maryland. You beat Maryland. Maryland by far is the most impressive game because when you put up 510 yards and you win by 14, but you were minus 4 turnovers, a college football team that is minus 4 turnovers wins about 9% of the time. So put Indiana in that mix to not only win, but cover that spread. That impressed the hell out of me. And, oh, yeah, by the way, I had UCLA as a big play a few weeks ago when they went on the road for their first road game, and he humbled me pretty quick. So they're a great story. I have them up right now in my power ratings. I have them as the, I believe, 5th best team in the Big Ten. they have to host Washington, host Nebraska, host Michigan, and go to Ohio State. They don't have enough to catch Ohio State, Penn State, or Oregon. They might be able to top Michigan and be the fourth best team, but I'm excited to see what they got. And I think this Northwestern team will be a test. I actually lean with Northwestern. Again, Indiana in that unique setting, off the lake in the soccer stadium. Yes, they put up 510 yards in back-to-back games, but again, those were all at home. 430 yards at UCLA is good, but we've seen that UCLA isn't that same type of team. So congratulations to all you Hoosier fans. You are headed in the right direction. It is great to see. This week, I do like the dog.
Oh, liking the dog. All right. Like him long term, maybe not necessarily this week. Interesting there. I know we had a question too there about, let's see, was it Duke, I believe. Duke and Georgia Tech was one of the games there that, Rob, we were interested in. Duke, of course, ends up handling their business against North Carolina, which was hysterical on so many different levels there. But Georgia Tech now laying almost a touchdown in this one now, 6.5, 7, somewhere in that ballpark there. It's a tough game, man. Do you trust Georgia Tech to be able to get enough? They should have enough offense even against that Manny Diaz Duke squad, no?
Well, I think with Georgia Tech, it's always guesswork, right, Joe? But you have to have them out in front.
Yeah.
If they're out in front, they can cover the number. If they get behind, it's difficult the way they play. Although I will say this, Haynes King at quarterback is capable of bringing them back. They're a little different than Boston College with Castellanos. They really don't want to throw the football. Georgia Tech, and I think they showed it in the game. Who'd they come back against? I'm trying to think. A couple of weeks back, they were down big. They came back. I think it was Syracuse, right?
Mm-hmm.
They gave up 515 yards. They were down like 17 points in the fourth quarter and came back. So they're capable. Duke is the real case study here. I mean, Duke comes in, new offensive coordinator, Jonathan Brewer, comes from SMU, comes off the air raid tree, comes in and immediately announces, we're going to go as fast as humanly possible. And when we're going that fast, we're going to go faster. They bring in Malik Murphy, backup quarterback for Quinn Ewers last year at Texas. And for anybody who watched their opener, you saw them. They want to go vertical. But Murphy just doesn't have the timing with his receivers, at least not in that game. And still, even with the comeback last week, you don't see Duke pushing the gas pedal, being successful doing it offensively. And I keep trying to be proactive, thinking one of these weeks, Duke is going to click and they're going to score big points. And to try and guess when that week is going to be after we've already played 4 or 5 times already, I don't know. It's hard to do. I would rather hang my hat on Georgia Tech. I think they're more balanced. I think they have enough to, get through the Duke defense. North Carolina was a pretty good test last week, and Duke stood up. But this week, to do it back-to-back, we'll see. I just don't trust Duke's offense enough at this point in time. I wish I could, because I'd be there with them plus the 7, and I'd probably be on over as well. But we have to wait and see when they break out here.
Is there a bigger fraudulent 5-0 team than Duke, Rob? I mean, come on, man. What? Elon by 23. Northwestern, I believe in double overtime. UConn, they were trailing in the fourth quarter, won by 5. Middle Tennessee State, half the team had the flu. That doesn't count. And then UNC by 1 when they trailed 20-0. At some point, this is going to go the other way for Duke, is it not?
Well, let me just point this out. They played the number 117 schedule. That actually sort of seems low when you read off the team.
Yep.
But here's the surprising number. So I have these strength of schedules are actually from ESPN, just so you guys know where they came from. So they have Duke 117 and Georgia Tech 37. So Georgia Tech is 80 spots better. But when you look at the yards per play diff, you take the offensive yards per play, subtract the defensive yards per play, Georgia Tech is actually number 33 at plus 1.5. Duke is 46. So yards per play, Georgia Tech is 13 spots better, having played a schedule 80 spots tougher. those numbers, there's only one way I can go, and that's with Georgia Tech, because they've proven to done work on the field. Now, again, I give Manny Diaz a lot of credit, and I think I could probably say, Joe, I was not a fan of Manny Diaz as a head coach, and you probably weren't down there in the U either. But what he's done here, turning this defense around, I do like coaches that failed and then go become OCs or DCs, because then they got a chip on their shoulder. They're returning to what they do best. And head coaching isn't for a lot of guys, because you got to be organized and not do what you do best. But Manny Diaz has impressed the hell out of me, what he's done with this defense, and yes, they haven't played anyone, but if you look, they are still number 28 with their defense when you compare what they allowed versus the opponent's season-to-date average. So when you're playing a crappy schedule, all you could do is compare to what everyone else did against his foes. Their defense, again, number 31, holding foes to 65 yards per game under their season average. So I like Duke's defense. I lean the under, but with those yards per play diff stats, with the much tougher schedule, Yellow Jackets the only way I can go.
Yeah, it's interesting, too. Brent Key, the head coach of Georgia Tech, much better as an underdog than as a favorite. Just 2-5 as a favorite, 13-4 against the number as a dog here with Georgia Tech. So it's climbed up to, I think, G. Hurt in the chat's telling us 9.5 he is seeing right now. He also said, Signetti, by the way, don't get too used to, Indiana fans don't get too used to him. Apparently, he already bought his University of Florida gear. So I don't know if there's an innuendo there. I don't know what's going on, G. Hurt. I'm just saying he's got the Florida gear ready to go. And, Drew, we got one more for you. And you and I, we know what's going to happen in this game. So we might as well just get it out in front here. The University of Miami is on its way out west, way west, Drew. I mean, as further west than as Berkeley can get here, over 2,400 miles. They don't often play in this time zone. And the fact that they're laying double digits against a Cal team with a coach whose numbers are 15-7 against the number as a double-digit underdog, and he covers by over a touchdown a game on average. This is always the spot we want to bet Cal in, right? But it's the U who puts up over 500 yards of offense a game, Drew. Oh, good Lord. We're not betting the U, are we?
Joe, I mean, what a game. To add on top of it, it's degenerate special time slot here with Miami.
Yes.
What is it, 10:30 Eastern time? So,
ACC after dark.
Oh, yeah. And you know those Miami fans. I mean, you're one of them. In terms of, you got to temper, how many beers you're having throughout the day, guys. You want to remember the game type deal. And that's coming from somebody with experience in that. What a great game, though. I can't wait to watch this one. I'm with you. I mean, this spot, it's tough for Miami going across country here to Berkeley. I mean, look at this, the Miami roster. It's Broward County, Dade County, Palm Beach County. Everybody's from south of Orlando pretty much. The majority of the roster's probably never been out there. I always worry about that in college football. I'll tell you this, Joe. We talked about it before. I almost feel like Miami maybe got their scare already against Virginia Tech, found a way to come back in that one. That was a wild one. But I think that actually helps them here. This Miami team is very, very talented, guys. And Cal, you got to tip your cap. You talked about some of it there, Joe. It's been a great start to the season. I just think Miami's the much more talented team here. So it would be the U or pass for me. And just real quickly, how about Duke? You guys were just talking about them. Indiana as well. Indiana, I think it's going to be a little bit tougher because of the Big Ten. But looking out at their schedule, I mean, they do have Michigan, Ohio State back-to-back games. But every other game is at least, winnable. And if they could somehow find a way to kind of split there with Michigan and Ohio State, and that's a big if, hey, who knows what the Hoosiers could be able to do there in the Big Ten, but even more so towards the Duke side of things. Now, I like Georgia Tech as well, like Ralph was talking about, and Georgia Tech's at home. So I do think Duke loses this one, but if they find a way to win, look at this schedule. FSU, SMU, then they're at Miami. But even if they drop it to the Hurricanes, they got NC State, Virginia Tech, and Wake. How about an 11-1 Duke team? I know it's looking out, and it's definitely a big if. But what if that happens and Duke kind of slips here into the playoffs? That could be a wild one, even if they lose to Miami. So I wouldn't write off the Blue Devils just yet, guys.
The defense is played. They're going to have their hands full. We're going to learn. It's their biggest test, I think, from an offensive perspective here. So this should be an interesting litmus test for the Duke Blue Devils taking on Georgia Tech in this one. And by the way, College game day is in Berkeley, people. Just going to leave that out there.
Is it really?
College game day is in Berkeley this weekend. Good Lord.
Wow.
Oh, boy. This is going to be. Not to mention Cal's coming off a bye. They got Ott back. And now I'm expecting Cristobal to win by more than double. Oh, good Lord. This is just disaster written all over it. What do you got, Veno?
I'll just say this. Cam Ward played Cal last year, right? He's with Washington State.
Yes.
In that game, Cam Ward goes 34-59, throws for 354 yards and 3 TDs in a 42-39 game. Better talent around him than he had at Washington State. But then again, Justin Wilcox has had a chance to see him and returns a bunch of his defense. So interesting contrast there. It depends what side of the fence you stand on, whether or not Cam Ward has an advantage over this defense because he's got better weapons, or whether Justin Wilcox, seeing him once, has an advantage over him. And I'm just going to go back real quick because we were saluting Indiana.
Mm-hmm.
But let's not forget where Cignetti came from. Took half his JMU team with him.
Right.
And Bob Chesney from Holy Cross stepped in at JMU. They've scored 133 points in the last 2 weeks. So let's have a little salute for JMU as well, who, despite having to pick up the pieces and use the portal and whatnot, is playing really, really well right now and taking money again this week up to 16.5-point favorites.
Yeah, well, that's a great point, too. It's they're becoming automatic, which is kind of crazy to think here. Also kind of crazy to think, guys, if you haven't hit that like button yet, what in the hell are you waiting for? We'd certainly appreciate it. Hit that thumbs up. Make sure you hit that bell in the upper right-hand corner. Those of you joining us on YouTube, Instagram, and, of course, TikTok. Follow us here at WagerTalk, as nobody has more daily content across all the sports betting landscapes than we do here. Not to mention, great opportunity to partner with Ralph, Drew, Rob, or anybody else at WagerTalk. How about a 7-day all-access pass for $77? Available right now, site-wide, any handicapper. Hell, do all 3 of them right now. Get 7 days, $77 on their page at wagertalk.com. No coupon needed. Available across the board for any handicapper. Great. And I mean, you got baseball now. You got postseason baseball. The next round begins on Saturday. And of course, between Drew, Rob, and Ralph there, nobody has followed the MLB all year long like these 3 guys have. College football, and of course the NFL Week 5. Great opportunity to partner up with a 7-day all-access pass. That means all sports, all plays, guys. Just $77 now over at wagertalk.com. All right, that'll wrap it up. We'll be back again tomorrow for another edition of the College Football Kickoff Show. Teddy Covers will be here. Jesse Shule, if he's done hanging out in the chat room, will eventually show up here as well at some point. Brian Leonard, we got you all set heading into the weekend. 5 more game previews, plus your questions and comments, all coming up tomorrow, 24 hours from now. Until then, on behalf of Ralph, Rob, and Drew, we appreciate the time as always. Don't forget, drop any questions you have in the comment section. We'll be answering them right up until kickoff. So until we meet again tomorrow, guys, best of luck with your plays. We'll see you again soon.